A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. The man who never reads lives only one. Come into the reading room, all you lovers of language and literature. This is the place for those of us who believe that reading is essential as we seek to rise above the ordinary, and the reading room contains a host of extraordinary people, leading lights of the written word. Authors, literary critics, columnists and ideas people will tantalize your minds with their wordplay while discussing the ideas and worldviews that form our wonderful literary milieu. Come step into a world of magic, the place of undiscovered treasures, a room of reading. Well, it's more of a pedant class than a reading room today, because in studio with us we have one of my favorite wordsmiths. Definitely one of the favorites from, well, I'd say at least the last 5 or 6 years. The only reason I bought a specific newspaper for many years, apart from their crossword puzzle, my goodness, how are you, Sue Groot? And it's so lovely to see your face again, even if it is in a pixel form.
Oh, nice to see you too, Mel. I remember sitting in your garden studio, and I don't see any plants there, but lovely studio you have there.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, no, unfortunately, the times there are changing, and it's quite a strange thing. And along with it, the language changes, which is why I need to talk to you about all of these things and our little bugbears. But, we're talking about in the garden studio, that was like 3 years ago that we used to get together on a monthly basis and talk about words.
Without masks.
Without masks. Well, we don't have masks on now, which is fantastic because we're just looking at each other on a screen. But, in 3 years, so much has changed. Would you have even believed at that stage that the situation we find ourselves in these days and how we've had to change and adapt our lives and our language could have possibly been a thing like when we were last together?
Absolutely not. I don't think anyone could. They say no one expects the Spanish Inquisition and nor a plague. So, but I think it's oddly enough, one of the positive, I'm not Pollyanna by any means. There's so many terrible things about these current strange, trying and disturbing times, as everyone always puts it. But one of the positive things, I think people are reading more. People are reading more news. It may not be real news all the time, but they're also reading more books. I've spoken to a few people at bookstores. Kate Rogan at Love Books says she's had a rush, which was like the December holidays just before lockdown, which was really great to hear. And online books are selling well. People are, not just because they've got more time, but I think there's just a certain reflectiveness in the air, in the atmosphere that makes people into readers. So if that's one of the small positive, large positive spin-offs, I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah, I'd say a big one. But it was quite interesting at the beginning of lockdown. There were a few people on Facebook who were sitting in, they usually read a lot, and I tend to read voraciously as well. And people were saying, I've got all of these books, but I can't read. I'm having a problem with reading.
I had that too. Yeah.
What was it? I just carry on reading regardless, regardless, shall we say.
Me too. I used to sort of motor through 2 or 3 or 4 books a week, partly for review and partly just because it was an escape from having to finish my thesis, which still isn't done and stuff like that. You
had the whole of COVID to do it and you haven't.
Exactly. But I did find, particularly when we thought that 3 weeks is all we were going to have and we were all very much homebound and locked down, I thought, wow, I'm going to read so much. And I found the same thing. And as it dragged on, I found it even harder to concentrate. I think it's maybe a general anxiety, maybe just feeling the world is abnormal. I found it very difficult. So until I pulled out my 7 volumes of Harry Potter and reread them all. And
well, good on you. I watched all the movies instead, yeah.
So that pulled me back in. And after that, since I finished those, they did take up quite a large chunk of time. And my boyfriend gets really cross with me because I cry and bawl every time. Can I say the wizard who dies, in case anyone hasn't read it?
Of course, if they haven't read it or seen it by now, who dies?
They will know. The one, it's not Gandalf, that's the other book. Dumbledore dies. Oh,
but Dumbledore died in the movie and came back reincarnated as a different character, as a different person, shall we say.
Anyway, I weep buckets every time. But so it's back to the reading. As having finished those, I have been able to read again, and there have been some wonderful books.
There's a lot of little things, on social media. What would we have done without social media? What would we have done without computers and cell phones and being able to video call your family on like WhatsApp? Can you imagine this had happened, say, 30, 40 years ago?
Exactly.
You would have been really kind of nowhere to go. At least now you can read online, you can stay in touch with people.
We can do this.
So wonderful. Like, I was teaching people how to garden the whole way through this as well, and you sit and look at this, and then you have all of these literary pages that pop up on Facebook, and people saying, oh, you must read this book and that good books guide and all of those. So it was really fascinating to see who was coming up with what. And of course, people doing their online book launches, because there's no such thing as getting crowds together anymore.
Exactly. It is remarkable what we've been able to do. In some ways, it's increased connectivity. I was talking to a psychologist yesterday who went to an online seminar with a governor of the Bank of England who turned out to be a guy who was in the socialist group with her when she was a child. And she didn't know that. So, it's these strange connections.
So talking about connections, what connections has your brain been making between new words and how they should be spoke?
Well, it is interesting. Just looking particularly at these strange, trying and terrible times, which really annoys me. And I'm sorry, I know people mean well, but it's how are you in these strange, trying and disturbing times? It's just how are you is fine. So there's a new language or a new ways of phrasing that have come up. One of the things that I've been pedantic about lately, and no one listens, as always, is the word spike. That is just such a wrong word to use. A spike is something that goes up and then goes down. What we're seeing now is not a spike, it's a surge. It might be a spike after it's gone down, but as soon as things are going up, they say, oh, it's spiking. And you see it if you watch medical dramas, they go, oh, his heart rate spiked, which meant it made you can't see me.
Yes. His temperature spiked for an hour.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it went up and came back down again.
So when people talk about...
There's no coming down from this one, is there?
Yeah, well, I think there is. So, some instances it is used properly, and kudos to those who do. But a lot of the time when people say spike, they mean surge. It's just going up. So if I may be pedantic just for a second.
You may. This is what we are supposed to be, the pedant class entirely. Where are you actually writing at the moment? Because that's, I was saying at the beginning, like, the one thing that I loved, and the reason I bought the newspaper that you wrote for, was purely to read your column, because it just really resonated with me, because we are complete pedants.
Well, it was called the Pedant Class, with obviously a play on peasant. We were the word peasants. But the Pedant Class was in Sunday Times Lifestyle, then it migrated online. So we started the Times Select digital platform, which is it's free to Sunday Times subscribers, kind of a premium content. It's got analysis, opinion, and fun stuff like words, and rants like words. And Time Select it's timeselect.co.za. So I write at the moment twice a week a column called Word in the Hand there. And it varies from kind of vague etymological musings and ramblings to real annoying rants. Like one of the things I got quite annoyed about recently, and in fact, it's one of the things people write into it still because you can place comments. And I'm sure you remember in the Pedant Class, the most entertaining was the readers' comments. They would come up with some lovely complaints. And I think there were a lot of kindred spirits there. So one of the ones recently someone wrote about is the annoyance about anniversary. So someone said it's the COVID 6-month anniversary. And as he pointed out, the Annie,
can't be an anniversary
part,
for 6 months.
Exactly. The Annie part means a year. So an anniversary is a year. And by the same token, people who say it's our 1-year anniversary, no, it's just your first anniversary, because that is already a year. So, so things like that. Yes, I am a pedant.
Well, I'll have to tell my kids about that. You can't have a 1-month anniversary.
No.
Because it has to be a year.
I see a pixie rolling.
So what would it be then? A month-versary?
A pixie's rolling its eyes at you there. I suppose a month-versary. And look, neologisms, new words are coined all the time. The one we have now, which I quite like, is a covidpreneur, which is a filthy, scummy, bottom-feeding, disgusting, sick person who steals funds meant for PPEs, that word Gavin likes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's basically the people who are lower than the shark's shadow.
Yes.
Yes, the stuff floating around pond scum. You're absolutely right.
Where we put 3 little stars in the paper, yeah.
Yes. So what other words have come to your notice, and you kind of sitting and thinking, okay, that one's good, and this one I could just do without completely?
Well, actually, one of them I mentioned on your Instagram feed a few days ago. You had a sneak peek of a garden that you were reviewing on the home channel. So you had spelt it correctly. Sneak is in EAK, peek, PEEK. But I get constantly, I have moaned about it many, many times. The sneak peek, P-E-A-K.
Where it's a mountain.
Yes. And I mean, what is this?
You can't sneak a mountain around. That thing's way too big, yeah.
Sneaky peeks, what do they sort of lie around corners waiting to jump out on us with their icy tops? So there is that, the sneak peek. There was actually, I learned about that recently because I'd seen it. I think people that often know the difference. And I've also seen the peak of the epidemic written as P-E-E-K, and it's hardly peeking out at us. I think it's in full view right now. But someone wrote about an Oxford professor called Simon Horobin, who he mounted a campaign to try and have words that are spelt differently but pronounced the same. They're called homonyms, like peek and peak, or peace and peace. A piece is a gun, peace is something you don't do with a gun. So he started this movement to try and have them all spelt the same. He said it really doesn't matter, but it didn't take off for some reason because I think a lot of people,
it wouldn't work. It can't have them spelt the same because then it doesn't, you're reading it and you don't know what it's supposed to be because that spelling is how it is.
Exactly. How would people know? And I think especially, I really feel for English second language learners from whatever their first language might be. I think it is one of the trickiest and most difficult languages to learn, partly because of homonyms. We have so many of them that are spelt the same, rough and tough, or things that are spelt the same way but pronounced differently. It's very confusing. But, I mean, on that line, if things weren't spelt differently, how would you know if someone meant a look around a corner or a mountaintop? You kind of need the differentiation.
Creeping up on you on tippy toes.
Yeah.
Doing a full Jupiter's on you. All right, if anybody knows who Phil Jupiter is, then you obviously watch QI quite a lot. But I mean, there's wonderful things that have come out of people when it comes to creating and coining phrases that we should just really be shot. And then the people in power say, okay, fine, we will allow this word. I'm sure you know what word I'm talking about.
Irregardless.
The one I'm like, why? That is like redundant.
It's irridiculous.
Well, thank you very much for that one. Why on earth do you think that they would have allowed irregardless to become a word?
It's so interesting. I did a panel at it was the Joburg Book Fair a few years ago with some of the most interesting people, the lexicographers, that's a hard word to say, lexicographers from the Oxford English Dictionary. Their Cape Town office, actually, they were up here. And they were talking about and showing these very technical graphs about how words get included in the dictionary. So they track them. Easier now that we have, web-based mechanisms to track how a word is used, and on social media and in books and all over. So it seems when a word reaches kind of critical mass, then the people who write the dictionaries go, well, maybe it's time to include it, even if we really, really hate it. And I think irregardless, unfortunately, is one of those. It's so irritating.
But why? I mean, I don't understand how English speakers would think that is actually a sensible thing to be saying.
I think it's like with regards, this is another thing that bugs people who write to my column is with regards to, so you can give regards to someone, sending them your best regards, but it's in regard to, without the S on the end. So, and that too seems to have fallen by the wayside. I seldom see anyone using it correctly. But it's pedants like you and I who hate that. But I suppose the point of the dictionaries is not so much to say it's okay or to try and sort of bastardize English. I think it's to try and help, as I was saying earlier, people who are learning English. So they're going to be hearing this word everywhere. If it's not in the dictionary, how are they going to know what it means? So the other one that annoys me, which is for completely lost the battle, we've literally lost the battle, is...
Oh, no, you haven't literally lost the battle, have you?
Literally and figuratively. So
good
people
Lord.
say...
If one more person says, and I literally died.
Exactly.
No, you didn't. You're still here. We're talking. How could you literally have died? It drives me absolutely up the wall.
But now that reached critical mass in common use. So it's been a few years now that even the most respected dictionaries include a sort of third or fourth definition, I'm not sure where, under literally to say figuratively, which means this word actually means the opposite of what it means. But I think it's to help, because if someone's learning English and they hear literally, it's going to be quite distressing to go, I literally died. It's like, I'm talking to a ghost.
But it's a wonderful thing I'm a qualified teaching English as a foreign language. Teachers, obviously, if you teach something, you're a teacher. And it is one of those things. We were sitting and I was talking with my kids about how difficult it is when it comes to Afrikaans and, learning the rules and regulations. Now, Afrikaans is a very simple language, actually. And we have to learn it like that to be able to speak it properly. But the best way to learn it, obviously, is if you're speaking it the whole time. So for people who haven't spoken English before, they have to learn all of these things about, I was like, what is an imperfect tense? What is active and passive voice? I mean, because this is not stuff that you actually, as an English speaker, learn particularly much at school, because we just know what it is.
Exactly. Yeah. It's very, and I mean, those things, I'm still hazy on those things, perfect and pluperfect and whatnot. I just, you kind of know this is right or it's wrong, apparently. Yeah. There's also an irrepluperfect.
What do you do with it?
No idea. But I mean, that's also, the Afrikaans thing is interesting. So there are quite a few South Africanisms that are accepted that even English speakers will use that have come from Afrikaans use of language. So, for instance, a lot of people will sign off an email by saying, enjoy your day further, which used to...
I do that.
Yes, but it used to bug me. It's like, what do you mean? Enjoy my day somewhere far away from you? It comes from the Afrikaans saying, geniet die dag verder, which is enjoy the rest of the day, we would say in English. But I think that's quite charming, actually, to have adopted that kind of phrasing into English, enjoy your day further.
I think it's an absolutely lovely one, because there are so many Afrikaans phrases and somps. I mean, there's nothing else that really explains somps.
No.
There's a couple of other words which maybe I won't use in polite company. But you sit and you look at a skoenlapper. And it's something that I see. Why would you call a butterfly a skoenlapper?
I know. What a cloth to wipe a shoe.
Yeah, exactly. But it is a lovely thing when you can take words from other languages. But for me, personifying words is also a thing. And we're not doing it at the moment. We are not Zooming.
No, exactly. Yeah, so it's called verbification. There's another more fancy word that I can't remember right now, but to take a noun and turn it into a verb. Hoovering, yes, and especially proper words. And Xeroxing. I mean, we don't do that anymore, but things like that, where it was trying to think of others. There would be kind of brand names that became, verbs, like let me go and omo my clothes. No, that didn't really
Google
take
something.
Off. Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
And
now we're Zooming.
We are indeed.
Well, I mean, females who are pedants have got to be like on the ball the whole time. So we are Zooming flat out the whole time.
To be able to reach out on Zoom is great, but there's one of the things I hate most. And again, we've lost the battle. That word phrase, reach out. It's such, the Americans say, instead of calling, reach out. I'm sorry. If you're a member of the Four Tops and you sang jazz in the 1950s, you can reach out. Otherwise, no.
No, we're not allowed to reach out because we're not allowed to touch. Remember?
Exactly.
That whole Neil Diamond song has been like thrown onto the scrap heap of vinyl at the moment because we're not allowed to reach out and touch each other.
Maybe that'll be the other positive spin-off of COVID is we'll get rid of that terrible reach out phrase.
One hopes. What else have you seen that's been getting your goiter?
Oh, so much. The other thing I hate, which I've hated for years, but it still doesn't go away, is the word curate, which, a carefully curated collection of cushions. It's just a collection of cushions that someone chose. It's trying to make things sound fancier than they are. So that's annoying.
So when are you allowed to use it? Just with art?
Again, losing battles. So people use it for everything from, curating what the content of a newspaper or whatever. So I think I may have to give up and stop being angry about that.
Just refuse to use it, though.
I will totally refuse to use it. Yeah. And another interesting one is, and it's interesting, it annoyed me until I started researching it, is the phrase pre-order, which is probably going to become very popular again in the next weeks when we hear when the booze ban is going to be lifted again. But it's in the week before the last booze ban was lifted, I think every single online liquor store was sending out things to place your pre-orders now. So I got all pedantic and went, what is a pre-order? How is a pre-order different
to an order?
It's just an order. But it turns out actually it's existed since the 1630s. And it happened when people with some means were building houses and, you couldn't just rush down to IKEA or, Game or wherever and go and buy your furniture. You had to grow a forest and then cut down the trees and then make the furniture. So you kind of had to pre-order stuff for your house even before you'd bought the land for your house on which to build it. So that word has been around for a long time.
There's a lot of words. I mean, imagine, but we say, okay, we don't like that they have put new words into the dictionary that we don't agree that should be words. However, it is a very fluid language. I think most languages are, but I think English specifically is a very fluid language. And if you think about how they used to speak. You were talking about in the 1600s, even earlier than that. In Chaucer's days, in the medieval times, how many of people can actually read Middle English? How many people?
Well done you, Mel.
If you look at what the way they spoke then, how they spelt words in those days, it was, you can't, there's no relation between what English was then and what English is now.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I love. I find that absolutely fascinating, is tracking the origins of words and how they came to us and all the different little paths and branches they took along the way. I mean, but it's interesting. I looked at this word at the same time as I was looking at pre-order. Some words that you think are modern are actually very old. So the word courier, which to us is a DHL or FedEx van arriving at the gate with a nice little yellow
word.
package. It goes back to Chaucer days, as you were saying. And it was a fast horse. It was a man sent on a fast horse. Comes from the French for a horse that runs fast, something like that.
Corsa.
So, yeah, exactly. So that hasn't changed. I mean, the meaning hasn't changed and the word hasn't changed. So some things stay the same. And then we get some wonderful new words. Like a few years ago, the word of the year, I think Merriam-Webster every year has a word of the year. And it was omnishambles, which applied specifically to the Brexit omnishambles at the time, but it has been used everywhere. And I mean, that's a marvelous word that totally deserves to be in the dictionary.
Oh, I can think of other words that would describe that situation a lot better. I think it has to do something with a cluster. Yeah.
That's a great
Although
word.
I tend to say, and I changed that, and I changed one letter into a clutter, which I thought worked a lot better.
Like, another word that's become a verb is Marie Kondo. You know, Marie Kondo your cupboard if you're cleaning it.
I've never, ever watched one of them. So, yes, I know what it's all about. But, I mean, this verbification of proper nouns is quite an interesting thing. Don't you Gordon Ramsay me.
Exactly.
So what else? What words have come up that you've actually enjoyed seeing coming around again, maybe, or being used in a new way?
So I don't know if enjoy is the right word because it made me angry in other ways. But one of the COVID-related words that I was looking at was vaccine. So the word vaccine literally means pertaining to cows, because it comes from when in the smallpox epidemic in the 1800s, when they used cowpox to inject people with, and people were very, very anti it. They were anti-vaxxers back then. There were these terrible paintings of women with cows' heads and everyone refusing to take the vaccine. But smallpox remains, I think, the only human disease that has been completely eradicated from the world. So the cowpox worked. So we get the word vaccine from cowpox, from cows. And unfortunately, the anti-vaxxers persist.
Well, it becomes a bit unwieldy when I refer to myself as an anti-vaxxer.
Yes, it's like anti-disestablishmentarianism.
That is no longer a word. It was struck off of the roll of actually acceptable words. It is no longer the longest name. It was a wonderful word, though. I still have no idea what it actually meant.
Yeah.
But of course, we do know that the longest word is flocky pocky nihil pilification.
Yeah, the only person I know who's ever said that. I've read it.
Flocky pocky nihil pilification, which is something like the act or art of rendering something entirely useless.
That's fantastic.
It's a wonderful word. I love that. So we can use words to our own amusement. And this is what it is that going and reading people's writings online has been a source of great amazement. So I may not have been able to sit down and actually read an entire book because your mind wanders and what am I going to do and am I going to have work again, etc., etc. And reading these short, pithy little articles from people or just little Facebook posts from people like Gus Silber, from people like Tom Eaton. I'm just going through the ones that I read. The mad one, what's his name? Also ex-Sunday Times, Ben Travato.
Oh, right, yeah.
And then Chris Murdoch, who I think I met in the days when he was at BMW. His COVID diaries, his plague diaries. I mean, a lot of people have been doing plague diaries. His are absolutely hysterical. They're so punny.
Yeah.
Anybody who can come up with brilliant puns is like somebody who you should really kind of buy into and say, right, I'm going to support you.
I couldn't agree more.
So what are you writing about at the moment? What kind of other things that have been coming across your desk have been making you enthralled?
Well, I write the odd, my day job, apart from writing online, is I'm deputy features editor at Sunday Times Insights section. So given that we all double up on everything, I also write quite a bit for them. So I had quite a lot of fun last week writing I think maybe a bit provocative piece about why there are so few statues of women in the world. This is for Women's Month, which is another thing I have issues with. But yeah.
Oh, it was actually the person who's sitting in the room with me at the moment put something up about 6 or 7 years ago. Happy, the most misused public holiday name ever.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, why must we only think about and rustle up a few women to talk to in August? They're kind of around the rest of the time as well, you know?
Yes. No, just the whole idea of it.
Yeah.
I mean, and the men get to take it off as a holiday as well. I'm sorry, only the women should be allowed to be taking the day off. The men should be out at work.
Indeed.
Not that there's much people being able to do work at the moment, but what can we say? So you wrote this. What did you actually write? I did see part of it.
Well, I just did some investigation on how many, so it's hard to get the exact figures, but it seems roughly about 2% of statues of historical figures in the world are of women. Now, obviously, there have not been as many women leaders as men. This is, you know, over the last couple of thousand years. But I was just looking at other reasons why there's more to it than that. And then some people saying that there shouldn't be statues at all, that the statue itself is essentially a very male concept. I'm not sure I agree, because I really, really love that Brenda Fassie statue in Newtown. But yeah, so just, yeah, looking at women South Africa has actually improved. I mean, we've overtaken the US in terms of proportion of historical women statues in the last few years, which is good. The US is particularly appalling. But yeah, what kind of women do we have statues of? And I mean, I find it amusing. The statue of Queen Victoria in Port Elizabeth is ritually vandalized. Every St. Patrick's Day, she has a green bra painted on her and so on. But I quite like that too.
She was a colonialist, wasn't she?
And that's public art. It's
Not
great.
a colonialist. It's also this whole thing that goes around at the moment about the patriarchy. And I mean, that very much buys into it, this whole patriarchy thing about the fewer statues.
Yeah.
And notice I said fewer, not less.
Oh, you're so good.
Another one of our bugbears. It's women getting quite upset about being told that they're feminists. Now, I've always been of the kind of thinking, I'm not a feminist, I'm a humanist. I couldn't.
Yeah, I spoke to.
But I mean, does that kind of drive you a bit nuts when you're having to write and read, and how you're watching your P's and Q's around using gender fluid words?
I suppose so. I mean, I think we are all, in some ways it's good and in some ways it can be limiting, but I think it is good to examine the words one is using and, you know, instead of just blithely using them. But the feminism thing is interesting, because it's been such a kind of maligned word, and people go, oh, you're a feminist, you're one of those bra-burning, shouty Karen people. I don't know, you know. But I spoke to actually psychologist Judith Ansell yesterday. I had a wonderful interview with her, which you can read in the Sunday Times on Sunday. But she was saying, how can one not be a feminist? She said, it's like saying it's not just Black Lives Who Matter, it's all lives matter. But actually, the Black Lives Matter is important because it's redressing an imbalance. And she said, being a feminist is redressing an imbalance. So really what you are is an equalist, but what you're doing is fighting for women's rights. And many men are feminists too, if you explain it in that sense. So I think you and I probably are, but I understand what you mean when people misinterpret it. And
I'm not a shouty Karen, and I apologize to all the Karens I know, and I know quite a few of them.
That's another thing.
And most of them are quite shouty.
Yeah.
How many Karens do you know who are actually shouty? A lot.
Yeah, but you know what, the more this, and something else Judith was saying, the Karen thing, I mean, it was quite funny and quite apt, but it's almost become this entrenched meme that is almost saying, well, women don't say anything, otherwise you might be a Karen. So it's become just another way of shutting people up, if you ask me, shutting women up.
Remember there was the whole thing 10 years ago about Steve, it was with the banking thing. And everybody, all the Steves got upset about it because it was making Steves out to be stupid.
Poor old Steves.
So, but I mean, get back to reading, okay? So, I mean, just to take it a little bit further, I mean, reading, we love it. We're never going to stop. Number one, reading makes you a better conversationalist. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, I could tell you all about Dumbledore dying.
Oh, shame. I'm so sorry. You should have just given me a call. I would have been there for you. Fact number two, neighbors will never complain when you're reading too loud. In your head, obviously. Fact number three, knowledge by osmosis has not yet been perfected, so you'd better read.
Excellent. Although you could listen to podcasts.
Yes, you can listen to podcasts.
Or audiobooks.
Absolutely, while you're doing other things. This is one thing I found, that I cannot just do one thing at once. I think maybe it's because we're so used to going so fast. When we suddenly got into shutdown, we weren't going fast enough, so we needed to do two things at least at once. So you can listen to the radio, listen to the podcast, and do the dishes, but you know, that's why you can't watch videos. That's why podcasts are so fantastic.
Exactly.
You can't read a book though.
No.
And watch TV. No.
No.
So that's the only thing. Books, you have to give your entire consciousness to them. and enjoy every moment of it. You have to subsume yourself into the book. You have to be eaten up by the written word. Right. Fact number 4. Here we go. Books have stopped bullets. Reading could save your life.
Great.
You like that one? And fact number 5, dinosaurs did not read. Look what happened to them.
Exactly.
So that's all it goes down to. I mean, any last witty words of wisdom that you might have for anybody who's listening in and thinking, oh, I really want to find out more about words and where they came from?
My last word is really, I think it's a bit unfair on dinosaurs. They couldn't read because their little arms were too small to hold the book far enough away.
That was only Tyrannosaurus Rex. Come on now. Stop discriminating against all the other dinosaurs. They had plenty of time. They just didn't do it.
They had weak eyesight. I think pre-order your dictionaries, and irregardless of whether literally is figuratively or not, let us allegedly just continue.
Actually, it's like all of those things on the people putting on other people's walls about there, and there.
Mm-hmm. Maybe one day we can talk about the apostrophe, Mel.
Oh, we will go into apostrophes like you can't believe. I've been reading a lot about apostrophes, poor apostrophes. We will also then get into a whole bunch of other stuff, like Ronnie Ancona when she's talking about obscurity. Mm-hmm. If you've never seen that, you need to watch it on QI.
Cool.
We'll get a clip of it and play it out the next time we speak, because it just absolutely is a total little gem. All right. Well, fantastic. I hope everybody gets along and buys all of your albums. I mean, albums.
I'm recording today.
I hope everybody gets along. I hope everybody gets along to buy your latest columns and enjoys them as much as I have over the years. I mean, I must say that I was absolutely distraught when the Pedant Class was no longer in the newspaper.
Time to select.
So I'm really glad that we can continue with our pedantry.
Thank you so much, Mel. Happy reading.
Thank you so much, Sue.
Bye.
You've been listening to another production from Solid Gold Podcasts.